Well, good afternoon. So I was having a casual conversation with a friend of mine last night talking about some of the work we're doing on rental protection here in the state of California. I started talking about what BCSH would be doing, how that related to the CDC's new guidelines a week after Fannie and Freddie and the folks at HUD had put out some new guidelines. And I realized quickly that I was not only confusing him, I was confusing myself. This whole area of rental protections, the issues of evictions, can make your head spin, particularly if you're just someone that simply wants to know what the heck is going on and how can I avoid being evicted from my home because of the impact that COVID-19 has had on my job, on my capacity to actually make ends meet. And so in an effort to try to make sense of all of that, I'm going to try to make sense of what the state of California is doing in relationship to what housing and urban development has done, in relationship to what the CDC has done with regard to some national guidelines on evictions and foreclosures, but really lay out the strategy for this state pursuant to a bill I signed close to midnight 48 hours ago that we believe will protect millions and millions of renters here in the state of California. We actually have a website as well that we hope can clarify and allow for the ability for you and your family to try to navigate some of the most frequently asked questions and access resources so that you can get a real concrete response during this very anxious time. But I want to lead with this. California is very proud of its leadership, leading the nation in renter protection. You may recall last year, a bill 1482, we've set forth the strongest eviction protections in the United States of America. Statewide rent cap was put into place. We were able to work with the legislature, work with some settlement dollars that came from an old mortgage settlement that the state had to loosen up the availability of $351 million for counseling services, direct grants, aid to tenants as well as homeowners, which is an important part of this conversation. Clearly, COVID has had a profound impact. And despite having some of the strongest renter protections in the nation, that has not ameliorated the stress, the anxiety that millions and millions of renters and homeowners are facing, struggling clearly with this pandemic. And so we've been working very closely with the legislature over the course of the last number of months. We had put together a number of stopgap efforts around executive orders and what we refer to in the state as the Judicial Council did the same, but those all expired. And so we needed to work in a more inspired way to come together as a legislature, the governor, with advocates representing every perspective of this debate. And we moved forward with new legislation that fundamentally addresses what you see on this page, and that is the impact this virus has had on millions of you. 5.4 million renters at risk now of being, losing their homes. Small property owners being foreclosed on because they can't make mortgage payments because renters can't make the monthly payments. And you can see just from this chart, the impact is disproportionate on our diverse communities, the African-American, Latino community in particular in the state of California, vulnerable, millions vulnerable to being evicted, thrown out onto the streets. The Turner Institute came up with a survey that estimated just in the state of California that renters, specifically as a class in this state, have experienced anywhere from a 50 to 66% drop in their income since this pandemic. And that is profound and clearly impactful. And so this legislation was foundational in terms to try to stabilize for the moment that reality for millions and millions of Californians. What we have is new eviction protections where individual tenant fills out a declaration hardship declaration related to the impact of COVID-19 specifically on their ability to make monthly rental payments. We've extended our protections through February 1st of next year. So no evictions for rent non-payment related to COVID-19 through February 2021. There are provisions in the bill, provisions that we've advanced, where people that can, we would like to see them make partial rent payments over the next number of months, roughly 25% at least, and that's a minimum, rental payments to help support this collective effort. Again, we're not only supporting renters, we want to be very sensitive to the needs, particularly of small property owners, people with just a few units, people that literally maybe inherited property or, saved money, put everything on the line to buy a few rental units, and they have a mortgage that they took out, and they rely on you as a tenant to make those payments in order to make their payments. And so all of this had to be considered, and all of this was as it relates to new foreclosure protections that we put into this bill to expand homeowner bill of rights for units 1 to 4 units, as well as to expand borrower rights as it relates to forbearance. This long way of saying this is all in relationship to how the banks interact with small property owners and putting some light, putting some protections in place in that area as well. An effort, as I said, to make, some understanding of all of this, the state of California has put together a new website. And I'm going to ask in a moment that the head of BSCH, which is our Business Consumer Services Housing, basically our housing agency for the purposes of this presentation, Lourdes will come up and she will talk about her work in putting together this site, housingiskey.com. Housingiskey.com. That's the new site. If you can't write that down or don't remember it, but you remember the COVID-19.ca.gov website, the main website, the main platform, we have this information on that site, COVID-19.ca.gov. But this new Housing is Key site is a website that will provide guidance, more importantly, resources, again, not just for tenants, but landlords, homeowners, and the like. Talk about the details of our new eviction framework, what the protections are, what they're not, and try to help explain all of this in a way that not only you can understand, but your lawyer can understand as well. Toolkits, legal aid resources, as you see, and a FAQ section, frequently asked questions section. Here's a static picture of that homepage of Housing is Key, and it is now appropriate at this moment that I now turn over this presentation to Lourdes Castro Ramirez, who has worked so hard in her capacity as chair of this agency to make sure that this site is dynamic, up and running, and means something. And I say means something to everybody, every Californian. You'll see the reference to California for all, always mindful that California is the most diverse state in the world's most diverse democracy. And we recognize we speak many languages. Sometimes we speak past each other. We don't want to do either. We want to make sure that we meet people where they are. And Lourdes is here to do just that as she explains the site a little bit more, but also provides some remarks in Spanish as well.
Thank you so much, Governor Newsom. Muchísimas gracias. As the governor mentioned, I'm Lourdes Castro Ramirez, and I serve as the Secretary of California's Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. And just want to acknowledge the leadership of our governor. I definitely agree with him when he says that it's very important that we make sense of our housing system. I think we're firm believers that we need to do much more to coordinate and ensure that we have a housing system that provides housing services from homelessness to homeownership. And so, as we all know, during this pandemic, many tenants have struggled to pay the rent and may be just one paycheck away from losing their apartment or the place that they call home. Thanks to the new law that has been signed by the governor just on Monday, and of course, with the leadership of the legislature, no renter can be evicted from their home if they're experiencing financial hardship due to COVID-19. And today, as the governor mentioned, we are excited to be able to launch this one dedicated site to help educate and provide the resources that tenants, landlords, homeowners, and also our partner agencies will need to help navigate through these protections to ensure that nobody loses their place that they call home. The Housing is Key campaign will provide Californians with information in multiple languages with resources as outlined. And so we invite you to visit the covid19.ca.gov or housingiskey.com. And now I'd like to pivot and share some remarks in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking audience and community members. Buenas tardes, soy Lourdes Castro Ramírez, secretaria del Departamento de la Agencia de Vivienda, Servicios al Consumidor y Negocios. Y durante esta pandemia todos sabemos que muchos inquilinos han tenido dificultades para pagar el alquiler o la renta. Y es posible que estén a un cheque de perder su apartamento o su casa. Gracias a una nueva ley firmada por el gobernador con el apoyo de la legislatura, el gobernador Gavin Newsom este lunes firmó una ley donde ningún inquilino puede ser desalojado de su casa si está pasando por dificultades, especialmente dificultades asociadas con COVID-19. Las protecciones van a estar disponibles hasta el 31 de enero del 2021. Hoy nos complace también en anunciar una nueva campaña, la campaña llamada La Vivienda es Clave, Housing is Key. Otra vez, la vivienda es clave. Los californianos pueden visitar COVID-19 o la vivienda es clave para tener acceso a los recursos necesarios para mantenerse informados y también para tener acceso a estas protecciones. Esta campaña permanecerá vigente no nomás durante el COVID-19, pero el plan es de seguir dando recursos a la comunidad. También hay información para los propietarios de viviendas para ayudarles a cómo navegar los recursos. Y el sitio tiene formularios, tiene formas para ayudarles con este proceso. Están disponibles en español y en otros idiomas. Estamos comprometidos a brindar la mayor cantidad de información y los recursos necesarios para que todos los californianos puedan tener acceso a una vivienda digna. Muchas gracias por su apoyo y por estar con nosotros durante estos momentos tan difíciles. Con eso, invito al gobernador para que siga su presa.
Thank you, Lourdes. And so that's the site, and we hope people take advantage of it, avail themselves of it, and in an effort to avail you of a little bit of deeper insight into understanding of what occurred over the last 24 hours. You may have read that the federal government came out with some new federal guidelines through the CDC that put forth some tenant protections that last through the end of this year. Our protections are not impacted by those federal rules and regulations. Our protections go a little farther than the federal government. There's no income cap as the federal government currently has. Again, ours go through February 1st of next year. They don't expire at the end of this year. The reference to Fannie and Freddie and Housing and Urban Development, all of those, again, separate tracks, part and parcel of the broad swatch of our landlord and mortgage-backed assistance and other federal agencies that are in this tenant and landlord space. Again, not to confuse you, we're just trying to, again, find our own place in this map, in this mix, and California, again, is leaning in more aggressively than we believe any other state in this country. And this resource guide, this website, hopefully will clarify any specific questions you have. And one of those questions, by the way, that you may have is, I live in a community. They actually go even further. All local ordinances, all local rules and regulations are not impacted by the federal guidelines that just came out, nor what the state of California is doing. So got to weave through a little bit all of this. We're hoping to make it a little bit easier on this Housing is Key website, and we encourage you to avail yourself to it. And I just want to thank all of the good work that was done by the California legislature and legislative leadership, a lot of key staff that worked very aggressively and diligently to get that bill done and to quite literally get it signed before midnight deadline, which we were able to accomplish late Monday evening. What Lourdes just referenced, though, was not just the issues of housing. She also referenced the issue of homelessness. It goes without saying these things are connected, putting millions and millions of Californians at risk of being removed from their homes, from their apartments, would obviously impact our greater call in terms of addressing and ending homelessness here in the state of California. This remains the top priority of our administration. As we battle COVID, we have not taken our eye off the ball in terms of our responsibility to address the issue of homelessness. We came in to the year with this being our top priority. We're going to continue to focus on this through the end of this year, and I can assure you for many, many years to come, as we must do more and do better in this space. And so I wanted to give people just an update, brief update in some of those, as it relates to some of those efforts. Last year, you may have seen, and we talked a lot about it, we put an unprecedented amount of support to address the issue of homelessness, supporting cities and counties with discretionary money, the likes of which they've never had in the past. Close to $1 billion direct supports for homelessness. And that's not our entire housing portfolio. That's just specifically targeting the issue of homelessness. It's not just about spending money. I recognize that. It's a resourceful mindset. Doing things differently is also foundational in our approach, and that is deeply part of our focus as we moved into this new year. We did $628 million in this last budget, despite historic budget shortfalls. We put an additional $628 million in emergency aid to help support cities and counties under the pressure of COVID-19 and the economic outcomes as a consequence. We also announced efforts this year to put $600 million into a new initiative, Project Home Key. I've talked about it in the past. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a moment, but all total, $1.25 billion was put into this year's budget, more than last year, despite the budgetary challenges, more than last year, to focus on an emergency approach, a direct service approach to create, as we say in psychology, a pattern interrupt to what we see out on the streets and sidewalks. And I am not naive, because I see exactly what you see. And I can assure you, we are just winding up in many of these efforts. Project Home Key comes from a program many of you are familiar with, which is our Room Key program. Just since April, and I think this is an important slide, just since April, we took pen to paper, came up with an idea, and looked at this COVID crisis anew as it relates to the issue of homelessness. And we have provided housing for 22,000 people just in the last few months. Years and years to build up a system, and overnight, just in the last 100 plus days, we were able to serve over 22,000 individuals. We were able to procure over 16,000 hotel rooms, 344 different hotels in 55 of our 58 counties, including sovereign tribal nations that participated in this unprecedented effort, this unprecedented program. We want to build on that program as we built last year an additional point of access, and that was 1,345 new trailers that we were able to get out to 26 counties and 2 tribal nations. By the way, 1,345 trailers. These trailers went out, were delivered, and these trailers are not just for one individual. Many families are in these trailers. Many individuals have cohorted in these trailers. It's been, again, part and parcel of our emergency response to deal with this crisis, all part, again, of the Project Room Key effort. But as I said, this Room Key effort now is merging into a Home Key strategy, more permanence. That was an emergency response. Now we need a permanent response. And I've long believed that homelessness is solved through permanent supportive housing. I said it many, many times that shelter solves sleep, but housing and supportive services solve homelessness. I've had a bias for decades, housing first. Housing as a point of stability, point of pride, a key, a lock, place to call your home. Then you start dealing with the underlying issues, the reason people are out in the streets and sidewalks in the first place. But stability is foundational. You live out under the elements, you live under a freeway overpass, and someone says, well, maybe you shouldn't self-medicate any longer. That's harder to convince an individual than when they have a place to call their home, a place where they feel safe, where they can actually put their belongings, when they can take a deep breath, and they can start contextualizing the conditions that led to their situation in the first place. And so that's why we have put tremendous effort and very gratified that this effort was supported by the legislature, supported by many in the advocacy community and many cities and counties, which I'll get to in a moment. Unprecedented, $600 million program to purchase permanent hotels and motels and apartment buildings throughout the state of California so we can convert to being part of our permanent stock of support. Not all permanent supportive housing, many transitional housing. Many of these units could be used for a myriad of purposes, but provide us assets the state has never had in the past. And let me just make this crystal clear. As a former mayor, the state hasn't been focused on the issue of homelessness. It hasn't been a focus of many, many administrations. It's not a point of critique. It's just factual. It has been focus of mayors primarily and county officials that have been burdened with this challenge. And we're trying to change that paradigm, build capacity, build partnership, recognizing that it is localism that's determinative, meaning local government has to drive, actually deliver, but the state is now providing more in the ways of support than we ever have. Again, we're just getting started. I recognize the conditions all throughout the state of California. They're unacceptable, and we're going to have to significantly do more, and particularly into the next year as we work our way out of COVID and deal with the economic challenges. It's self-evident that this has to be our top priority, and it is. So $600 million was set aside in the budget to purchase these hotels and motels. Here's the good news. 138 applications have already come in just in the last few weeks from 67 jurisdictions across this state. You can say, they say in marketing lexicon, they've oversubscribed the total amount that's been allocated, which is a wonderful problem to have, a challenge nonetheless. Now we're trying to be even more resourceful to see if we can find more resources in addition to the $600 million. These units must be acquired by the end of the year, so there's a date with, as we say, destiny, meaning this is not one of those open-ended things where you hear of an initiative, it never gets done, it's whittled away, the money is diluted. This is a different approach, focused, precise, measurable, real transparency, more important, accountability at the local level to acquire these units by the end of the calendar year. The good news is the applications have come in and the per unit cost is actually below the state's estimate. And for landlords, don't get any ideas there in terms of your negotiating capacity. We're still going to negotiate down because of the bulk strategy here, this per unit cost. But the good news is these dollars are being stretched further than we had anticipated. So I just wanted to highlight all of that because it's incredibly important to me personally, professionally, in terms of my roles and responsibility here as your governor. And one of the really remarkable things that came out of all of the stress and the travails of COVID-19 with an innovative mindset on this issue, and that's manifest in this home key strategy and manifest in the new approach to, again, housing as an element, housing as the building block, housing as our foundational principle first, in order then to build the building blocks of self-sufficiency, which is ultimately what we are advancing. This is not a permanent mindset. We want people to move through these building blocks of opportunity onto self-sufficiency, but they need that stability. And Home Key, we believe, will go a long way, one of many programs, but go a long way to providing that. With regard to moving forward and going a long way together, we have been on this journey over the last 3+ weeks battling these historic wildfires. Yesterday was with the head of FEMA, head of many state agencies, the head of CAL FIRE, among others, that toured a number of other sites throughout Northern California that have been impacted directly by these wildfires. We were out what we refer to as the CZU complex yesterday and talking to residents, talking to local elected and local leaders of every stripe about their efforts to repopulate many of the areas that were directly impacted by these fires. The issues of how these fires have impacted different parts of the state goes without saying, self-evidently, has impacted different parts of the state differently. We have currently now 14,900 firefighters that are currently deployed on the lines. That's down a little bit because we've seen some impact. We've seen some progress as it relates to getting our hands on top of the spread of these fires. We're battling over 900 fires across the state of California. That has grown by roughly 34 just overnight. Now 1.5 million acres have been burned since this pandemic. We've lost, tragically, 8 individuals and have had over 3,100 structures destroyed. And by the way, the 8 fatalities and the number of structures that we've identified as destroyed, that's currently observed, and there's no question that many more structures likely are at that list, and let's just pray we don't see any new fatalities. As it relates to some of the larger complexes, refer to them, remember these primarily were lightning complex fires, many different fires in a geographic area, many of them coming together as one larger fire. The LNU complex, Lake Napa area in the state of California, Friday was 35% contained, 371,000 acres. You can see today real progress on containment, 76% contained. You can see in next slide the CZU fire, 26% contained. That's where we were yesterday. Some of the most majestic forests anywhere in the world, old growth redwoods going back 1,400 years. There's been real progress on that CZU fire, 26% containment, now close to 50% containment at 46%. The SCU fire, and this is the Santa Clara region, 35% containment. When I last presented these slides on Friday, and today you see containment now north of 70%, it's 72% containment. Additional fires that we have focused on, and as of note, the August fire, which is a larger grass fire, progress there, a little stubborn from Friday till today, but progress nonetheless, 20% containment. And the sheep fire, another one we had highlighted that had low containment last week, 30% on Friday. The sheep now over 70% contained. So these are some of the larger fires. The one remaining fire I wanted to highlight is a fire that may not be as large in scale and scope as the LNU or SCU, but is precious in terms of the impact on the resources. This is near some of the world's most majestic sequoias in Tulare County. Stubborn, again, 0% containment. Now we are at 1%, but nonetheless, 1% is progress, but you can see the number of acreage, 23,000 up to 42,000. We, again, are monitoring this one very, very closely. So that's it. Broad strokes update in terms of the wildfires in the state. Let me just update you quickly on the case numbers on COVID. In the last week, we've seen a reduction in the total number of cases, COVID-19 cases. 4,708 is our 7-day average. The new numbers came in yesterday, 4,255, and that's based upon over roughly 110,000 tests that came in. Over 110,000 tests, some 4,255 individuals were tested positive. We always look at the 14-day positivity rate. You can see this positivity rate now down to 5.1% in the state of California. Interestingly, and I think importantly, the 7-day, this is the 14-day positivity at 5.1%. The 7-day positivity is at 4.4% in the state. So 4.4% positivity in the state of California over the last 7 days, 5.1% over the last 14 days. You also can see the average number of daily tests is starting to go back up again. The impacts of those fires, as we make progress in the fires, we'll get those testing numbers back up, now getting close to an average of 110,000 over the last 7 days. Speaking of the last 14 days, we've seen a reduction in hospitalizations and ICUs, tracking roughly equivalently, 23% decline in hospitalizations over the last 2 weeks, 23% decline in the total number of ICU patients that we've admitted into our system over the last 14 days. So progress, ICUs, progress, hospitalizations, real progress we are seeing in sort of stability with our positivity rate, both on the 14-day and on that 7-day. You can see the 7-day average down to 4,708 as we continue to get tests north of 100,000, averaging just shy of 110,000 tests. That's a good sign, but nonetheless, it is a stubborn sign. All of these slides stubborn in terms of the ongoing reality and the importance with that reality to extend a reminder to each and every one of you of the power and potency of the decisions you've made to date that have helped us through this latest increase in cases, and that's wearing those masks, physically distancing, washing your hands, and minimizing mixing. And I know this has become rote to you, and every time you watch these presentations, I repeat this mantra over and over again, but let me do it in anticipation of this weekend, this 3-day weekend, the importance of this message, the importance this weekend of wearing the mask, the importance this weekend of trying to avoid and minimize outside of your household mixing with different households and cohorts of individuals, strangers, even friends and extended family that you haven't seen or been with. This is so foundational. We saw this a few months back. We started to see progress over extended period of time, and invariably people said, well, looks like we're out of the woods. Looks like we've tamed this transmission, and we can go back, even with modest modifications, to the way things were. That absolutely, we must learn from that example. We must absolutely learn from that more recent historic example, and that's why it's more important than ever to be vigilant as we work through the next few months, work through this flu season, what we call this twindemic, the COVID-19 now meeting flu season, and work through this invariable second wave as we get to closer to these vaccines and the high-quality therapeutics that ultimately we will have. The question is, what impact will we make in terms of mitigating the spread? Until then, that impact is demonstrable by your example and by the potency and power of these simple 4 tasks. So thank you again for the time and your attention. And again, forgive us for being a little bit over the map today on evictions and homelessness, but I think they're profoundly connected, as they are equally profoundly important at this moment. Progress again, profound progress on these wildfires, and I cannot express more my gratitude to all the CAL FIRE men and women and all the mutual aid from across not only the state but all across the country that's really done an extraordinary job at this historic moment with these historic wildfires in this state. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Adam Beam, Associated Press.
Governor, the state legislature has finished its work for the year. Lawmakers failed to pass some high-profile bills on housing and police reform and other issues, and in part because legislative leaders said they ran out of time in a virus-shortened session. Would you call the legislature into a special session this fall to address some of these issues and other issues related to the pandemic's impact, including broadband access for distance learning?
Yeah, if necessary, I'm open to that. Working with legislative leaders, we've had many discussions over the course of the last number of months. There were some procedural issues that you're referencing. There were some issues that were rather curious where both houses passed legislation. We were looking forward to seeing that legislation land our proverbial desk for signature. I'm always open to that, but that's based upon a specific criteria, specific agenda, and necessity as it relates to any of those ideas or any others that may, for procedural and or other reasons, fallen short because of COVID-19.
Dustin Gardner, SF Chronicle.
Hi, thank you, Governor. Regarding the legislative session, several major housing bills failed, including SB 1120 related to duplexes that Pro Tem Atkins sponsored. Do you wish you had done more to increase urgency around these bills? Do you feel you could have done more in that sense?
Well, we did a lot. We were highlighting them here in our news conferences. We were working very aggressively with legislative leaders. In fact, that bill passed both houses. One specific example of a bill that a lot of people worked hard on. No one worked harder than the pro tem. Our offices were hand in glove in terms of those housing bills and those packages. So unfortunately, that was the case. That's what occurred. And so we are looking forward to jump-starting those conversations. We got 18 bills done last year. A number of housing bills did make their way to my desk. A number of areas that we continue to work on where we're committed to the cause. And I think both the legislative leaders, both representing the Assembly and the Senate, are committed as well. And a lot of work has been done this year, which will lay the foundation for us to move very, very quickly into the new session. But again, we are working very, very closely with Speaker Rendon and Pro Tem Atkins, and very grateful, particularly the Senate's leadership with those bills, and just unfortunate that a number of them are not making their way to my signature.
Brady McDonald, Orange County Register.
Hey, Governor. I had two questions related to theme parks. First, how do theme parks fit into the new four-tier plan? Do you envision theme parks reopening with like outdoor operations first and then indoor capped at 25% or 50%? And then second, you mentioned that on Friday you were meeting in an amusement park space. I was wondering how that went and if any progress was made.
Yeah, we're making a lot of progress in that space. The reason we set it aside, we bracketed, and I appreciate you recognizing we made that, we noted that last week when we put out these new four-tiered guidelines, is we still have work to do. All I can leave you with is progress is being made. We're still working on some details, and as soon as we are at a point where we can socialize, make public, we will.
Patrick McGreevy, LA Times.
Hello, Governor. Many residents say they're getting dozens of letters from the EDD regarding claims for unemployment benefits that they did not file in the names of people they do not know, and they're concerned that fraud may be involved. Have you been made aware of this issue? What's the EDD told you about what's going on, and to what extent are you concerned about fraud schemes that are targeting the state unemployment system during the pandemic?
Yeah, we've talked about it on multiple occasions in the past. The answer is yes, we are concerned about fraud in this space. We talked, I think, a week or so ago. We talked about some specific instances. You've added to an example, one of legions of examples of people across the spectrum, not just at EDD, that try to take advantage of taxpayers, take advantage of others. And we are working with local authorities as well as state agencies, working with federal authorities across jurisdiction to weed that out, to call that out. And I appreciate you highlighting that as it is a top priority for all of us, again, at every jurisdiction, federal, state, and local.
Alex Michelson, Fox 11.
Hi, Governor. Thank you for the question, and no grenades coming today. The issue of homelessness. You talked about it, about some of the progress that you've made, and clearly there is some progress being made on that front. But there's also such a problem that remains, so many people still on the streets. And I'm wondering, now that you sort of have some time to think about this, what do you think is really working in terms of what you're doing? And perhaps what is not working in terms of what you're doing? And is there any thought also in terms of commercial real estate, which is now not being used as much because people are working from home, maybe using some of that for housing?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, the answer to that is yes, and local government has the capacity now and the resources they have not had in the past, and the flexibility that they haven't necessarily had in the past to be creative in that respect, and to look at modifying existing use, to have the ability to move money at the local level, regional level, as well as the city level, to match a sense of urgency that's needed to address this issue. Look, here's my belief, couple things. It took us decades to get to where we are. I noted in my State of the State, and I'd encourage you to go back to my State of the State, we are committed to all of the things that we announced in that State of the State. Of course, none of us saw this pandemic coming as it relates to the impact that broader agenda and vision has had as it relates to the pandemic, meaning we've been impacted in terms of the pace of some of the things that we promoted. But we are resolved nonetheless to continue to advance those specific proposals and more broadly that agenda. And fundamentally, and this goes to your question, the fundamental agenda is, from my humble perspective, what doesn't work is continuing to do what you've done. You have to do things differently. There are certainly programs that work, they deserve to be replicated, but there are programs that do not work, and we need to call them out. Just because you have a program, just because you have good intentions, doesn't mean you're producing real results. There has to be more accountability. More accountability of providers, more accountability of local government. More accountability for people to say, you know what, this is not someone else's problem. This is not another city's problem. It's not another county's problem. We're going to take responsibility. We have a role to play. That's our approach on housing as well. Just ask those 47 cities that we put on notice relating to meeting their housing element and their goals as it relates to constructing more units. So our approach now, it's, we've been in here, this is just the second year, our second legislative session. Our approach is more accountability, a lot more transparency. We're going to provide more resources, but we're going to expect better results. And the area where I think we can agree on that can produce demonstrable results is, again, focusing on assets, these permanent assets, the ability to convert hotels and motels and buildings at lower costs, and the time to actually converting them happening within months, not literally many, many years, I think can provide us more resources than the state has ever seen and more capacity to see results. Because what you want at the end of the day, you want to see people moved off the streets. So many people think of homelessness. I think of homelessness broadly. Most people think about it as street population. That's one subset, chronic homeless. That chronic homeless issue has exploded in this state over the last number of years. It's unacceptable, and we have to hit it head on. We have to do it ethically, morally. We have to do it compassionately, but we also have to do it with more accountability and more transparency. And look, I'm a taxpayer just like the rest of you watching. It's not just about more and more money. We want to see more and more results. And so this project, Home Key, is about moving in that direction. This is a big, bold push, Trust me, in the past, it's been incremental. Been a few $1 million here, a few $1 million there. Maybe you hit $10 million and everybody thinks this is a historic moment. We're talking about close to $750 million. We're going to leverage more money than that $600 million. Overnight, just in a few months in this space. That's something we've never seen in the state's history. And so I think that could prove to be very, very instrumental in jumpstarting a completely new narrative as it relates to this issue. And if it doesn't, we'll own that and we'll come up with new strategies. It's one of many strategies, but maybe the most foundational. And it will anchor, from my perspective, the new approach that we're advancing here in this state. And that new approach was, again, enunciated in that State of the State. And that includes across the spectrum additional strategies, particularly on the issue of mental health, on issues of conservatorships. On our proposal we referenced called CalAIM. We're not walking away from CalAIM. We may have had to delay the $695 million investment in that proposal to integrate brain health and integrate physical health and lead the nation in this reform, and that's foundational in any real strategy to address the homeless issue. But that proposal still very much in play, and we are going to continue to advance it. And as the resources present themselves, I can assure you we will mark that moment where we, forgive the language, turn the page on the politics of the status quo on this issue and move to a more enlightened and more demonstrably successful direction tackling this issue.
Ryan Heap, KCRA 3.
Hi, Governor. More specific question about those EDD fraud letters. What is your understanding of how widespread this fraud may be? And also, what's your reaction to the call from some legislators for a swift emergency audit of EDD to better understand the scope of this fraud problem?
Yeah, we've got a brand new team, 5 new people we just put into place at EDD just in the last few weeks. So 5 new people with fresh perspective, new capacity to get in under the hood and figure this out in real time. I appreciate the legislation. Was get a new team of people in there, and that's exactly what we've done to get under the hood and figure out how widespread this is. Again, you're focused on one part of the EDD challenge. There are many challenges that we also have to address in real time. And this specific example of fraud is not the only example of people trying to game and take advantage of the system. And then, of course, beyond all of that, the imperative that is our focus as well by September 10th, of getting that $300 incremental payment into people's hands, into their pockets, rather, or into their checking and savings accounts. September 10th, getting that $300 drawn down, getting that system up and running, which is foundational. That's billions and billions and billions of dollars in the hands of people that really need it, and that is equally a top priority of this administration.
Final question, Angela Hart, Kaiser Health News.
Hi, Governor. I wanted to ask you an election question. I wonder how much you think COVID-19 is going to shape the national debate over healthcare in November at both the state and the national level. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, especially because the state is making lots of big healthcare plans regardless of COVID-19 and leading the defense of the ACA. So I guess I just wonder if you see that fitting into the discourse of the November election, and if so, how?
Yeah, the politicians make lousy pundits, so forgive me. I may leave you wanting as it relates to my punditry on this. The next 62 days, sadly, from my humble perspective, may be about other things, distractions, little things that become big things that are advanced in order to divide. So the issue of healthcare, foundationally, we'll continue to focus on and continue to lead on. And I appreciate you highlighting the defense of the Affordable Care Act, that this state is actually taken that third leg of the stool that was vandalized by the Trump administration as it relates to the mandate, and we reconstituted that. As a consequence, cards. And you've seen this demonstrably as it relates to the impact of that decision, increasing total number of people enrolled in our exchange, but also lowering the costs, or at least reducing the impact on healthcare cost growth, which has been significant in the last few years because of great work Peter Lee and others have done on our exchange. We want to build on that. We're going to continue to advance our efforts to reform the Medi-Cal system, and that's a big part of the CalAIM proposal that I just referenced a moment ago. We're going to continue to drill down on runaway prescription drug costs, this California RX, looking to potentially manufacture our own generics, or at least partner with a manufacturer to create our own California generics in this state, use our marketing muscle, our marketing power to leverage lower costs for individuals, as well as continue to expand our coverage, including deepen subsidies to the middle class, which are struggling, particularly at this moment through this pandemic. Look, let me just end on this. It is, box A, or rather door A or door Z, in terms of the contrast between these two candidates in terms of your health care, your future, your family's health care, your family's future. We can quite literally go backwards. An administration that wants to get rid of, actively wants to get rid of health care for tens of millions of people with pre-existing conditions, or eliminate health care expansion by eliminating the Affordable Care Act and its progress it's made in this country. And another that actually helped design it and helped build it and wants to create a more competitive environment to drive down costs and increase expansion through a public option and the like. Clearly, from my humble perspective, one candidate fits the needs of this state by creating a dynamic where we can accelerate our healthcare reforms and have a real partner that can advance those reforms to lower costs and improve quality, as well as expand access in real time. So we are very, very eager. We are very hopeful this is a bigger part of the discussion in the next 62 days, but I'm not naive about how nature of presidential politics works. But I can assure you this, whatever happens in November, California will continue to lead, and we will be creative and work with, through, or around whatever obstacles come in our way. And so I want to thank everybody for all the work that you've done to help us get to this point where we can lay claim to that 4.4% positivity rate. Let's get this down into, let's knock this thing down even further. We still have work to do to get this transmission rate down. We still have a lot of work to do in parts of the state, certain counties in the state that are struggling more than other parts of the state. But again, do your part. We will collectively come out the other end much more quickly, and certainly with the kind of resiliency that all of us expect of this great state. Take care, everybody. Look forward to catching up the next few days.